And we're live. Very excited for today's session. Sulha has officially partnered up with the Israeli-Palestinian Peace Symposium. I'm not going to explain too much about who they are because you're going to hear that from them in just a short moment. But for those who are familiar with what we do, you know that collaboration with like-minded people and like-minded organizations is very much part of the ethos of Sulha. So this collaboration is one I'm very much excited for. And I hope it's the first of many live streams together. For those who are new to this channel, Sulha is a platform that works on reconciling between Israelis and Palestinians. We understand that no matter what solution is found to the conflict, reconciliation will be an integral part of that solution. So that's what we're all about, reconciliation. We do that through weekly live streams. We bring on people, Israelis, Palestinians, sometimes for debate, sometimes for discussion, sometimes for panels, and we speak. That's what we're all about. So if this is your first time seeing what we do and you like it, I hope you stick around and tune in for future events. Okay, we're going to get the show on the road. Before we get started, we're going to start with a musical introduction. I lost my sheet. I don't remember what it's called. I'm using a new computer today. It's called Beautiful That Way by Elias Glenos. There we go. Cool.
Smile without a reason why. Love as if you were a child. Smile no matter what they tell you. Don't listen to a word they say, 'cause life is beautiful that way. Tears, a tidal wave of tears. Light that slowly disappears. Wait before you close the curtain. There's still another game to play, and life is beautiful that way. La 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 la. La 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 la. Here with his eyes forevermore, I will always be as close as you remember from before. Now that you're out there on your own, remember what is real and what we dream is love alone. Keep the laughter in your eyes. Soon your long-awaited prize. We'll forget about our sorrows and think about a brighter day, 'cause life is beautiful that way. La 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 la. La 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 la.
Hold on. That was a nice song. A little change from how we normally do things here. We might need to adopt that. We now have Dubi of Vigur. Wait, hold on, guys. It's a new computer, and it is slightly affecting my ability to do this. There we go.
You did it. Hi, I'm Rabbi Dubi of Vigur. I'm a secular rabbi, humanistic secular rabbi, which means that in my Judaism, human beings are in the center. My Judaism is a cultural Judaism, which means no God business in my cultural identity, no religious rules. From my point of view, religious or believing in such thing or another is a private issue between you and God, if there is one, no matter who is or she is there. So, first of all human beings were born from the same source, right? Whether you believe in God, whether you believe in Darwin system, all the people, all human beings were born from the same source, the same whatever. So we can claim that they are equal or not. This is a moral issue, but we know they came from the same source. So in this case, everybody has the same right, the same equal rights to be happy. That's people goals, to be happy. And everybody in this world, in this universe, has the same right to be happy. And no one has the right to stop him from reaching this happiness. So what I'm doing, I'm a member of rabbis for human rights in Israel. It's organizations that we came and stand in front of the settlers, instead in front of any hooligan that try to hit Arabs or to disturb their agricultural working. We came for them, for the Arab, for the Palestinians, farmers, for the Palestinians, olive pickers. We come and help them. We come to be with them and to stand between them. Sometimes the army, sometimes other people that came to harm them. So we stand in our bodies, not soul, not speaking, not lectures, not teaching. We are coming with our bodies and stand between them and the in the army or the settlers. That's what we are doing, and I hope this conversation, this meeting will do something for the situation, which is impossible, and nobody like what's going on, neither the Israelis nor the Palestinians. So we should remember, everybody in this universe has the right to be happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dubi. Excellent. Hi, I'm going to introduce, I'm pleased to introduce Fatima Argun, who is the co-chair and co-facilitator of the Israeli-Palestinian Peace Symposium series. She's an interfaith leader, grassroots activist, facilitator, and author, an international business and strategic planning consultant, visionary, and advocate, focusing on interfaith engagement, conflict management, and women's empowerment. Her career includes work at senior levels in both the private sector and as a management consultant in government, where she supported women and minority-owned enterprises locally and internationally. Fatima is a member of numerous interfaith boards, including the Center for Pluralism, and Vice President of the Jewish Islamic Dialogue Society. She serves as chair of the Interfaith Outreach and Advocacy Caucus and is a co-founder and former co-leader of the Arlington chapter of the Sisterhood of Salam Shalom, a national Jewish Muslim women's peace-building organization. Fatima, please go ahead.
Thank you, Moshe. Well, hello and good morning, good evening, depending on where you are today. And welcome to the fifth in our Israeli-Palestinian Peace Symposium series. We are absolutely delighted to be with you today. We'd like to also personally thank Adar Weinreb, on whose Sulha platform we are bringing this production to you today. Before we get started, I'd like to first ask that we all send positive thoughts and prayers out to Joel Siegel, the visionary behind the symposium series, for good health as he is now in recovery from COVID and unfortunately is not able to join us today. I'd also like to wish everyone a belated Happy New Year and Merry Christmas to all Orthodox Christians who are celebrating this time of year. As we start our program, I just wanted to make you aware of a few things that are going on during this time, specifically in Israel-Palestine. Just a couple of data points that I think will be very interesting for everyone. First of all, the extremists are becoming more violent. Violent assaults against Palestinians in the West Bank went up by nearly 50% over the past year, but arrests and indictments remain scant in all but the most extreme cases. They're saying it's hard to point to a specific reason for the latest wave of terrorist attacks in Jerusalem and the West Bank, but the attacks are also the result of calls by Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and other Gaza-based groups for stepping up the resistance against Israel. The other really important data point is Abu Mazen's visit to Israel. In his visit, Abu Mazen warns of approaching explosion. The Palestinian-Israeli situation is on the verge of explosion, he reportedly warned Gantz, because West Bank settlers and Temple Mount fanatics need to be restrained. So the meeting had a security dimension. Over the last 2 months, violent incidents of rock throwing by Palestinians and vigilante attacks by settlers have been on the increase, particularly in the northern West Bank. Finally, the Minister of Defense is reaching out for security collaboration. So these are all very important developments. If you've been paying attention, I think, we'll be getting into that as, during our conversations. But Gantz offers Abbas has offered Abbas a series of goodwill gestures in a rare Ramallah meeting. Among the economic gestures offered to Abbas was a NIS $500 million loan. He said many of the permit applications for NIS, for those that you don't know, is new Israeli shekels. Many of the permit applications for Palestinians will be digitized to streamline the process and make it easier and cheaper. The moves also included allowing an additional 16,000 Palestinians to work in Israel and having the civil administration approve more Palestinian building projects in Area C of the West Bank, which is under full IDF military and civilian control. So the left and center, so one other development is the left and center are searching for avenues of peace. The Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas invited all Israeli ministers to visit Ramallah and talk with him, including Ayelet Shaked, after he hosted a delegation from the Meretz Party on Sunday night. And finally, Minister Yair Lapid might open avenues when he replaces Prime Minister Bennett. Lapid has said that I may meet with Abbas as premier, but there won't be any peace talks. However, Lapid says that contrary to Bennett, he is prepared to meet with Abbas if necessary. So, if, as you have probably already noticed, there are a lot of positive developments, and we will be talking, I'm sure our esteemed speakers will be talking about much of that in our conversations going forward. So with that, I will hand it back to my, oh, actually, I think I need to introduce you, don't I, Moshe? Sorry about that. So I'm going to introduce my esteemed co-moderator, Moshe Chertoff, and I am looking for his intro here. Sorry about that. Give me a second. All right, here we go. Moshe Chertoff is the co-founder and co-chair of the Israeli-Palestinian Peace Symposium series. He and Joel Siegel have been working on this symposium series for a year and a half. He's a social activist who led a 3-year stand in the Western Galilee for tolerance and action against racism, in which he handed out over 42,500 flowers to passersby. Wow, that's a lot of flowers. As a peace activist, Moshe is also a member of various peace organizations in Israel. He's also a political activist in Israel's Meretz Party and the American Democrats Abroad Israel. A kibbutznik father of 5, he retired from high tech after 22 years in the industry, including at Microsoft, and the last 13 years at Johnson & Johnson in medical devices. Moshe, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Welcome to everybody. Hello again. Again, thank you to Adar and to Dubi for his wonderful words of an invocation that will help us think in the proper sense and get things into proper focus. And Fatima gave us a good update as to what the situation is on the ground and why we can at the same time be very sad of the developments, but also there are positive developments that we have to look forward to and try to help develop. So I'm Moshe Chertoff, and I believe that peace is possible and the only way. I'm not representing any organization here other than the steering committee of our voluntary symposium organization. We, the organizers and speakers, see you as active participants, although we can't offer you a microphone. We're asking you Americans for your help. This is not America forcing its way into a battle zone. It's Israelis and Palestinians who are in urgent need of help to prevent the next war. We have taken measures to ensure bringing speakers, including Palestinians and Israelis, Jews and Arabs, Americans, women and men, in short, all who are active and working for an agreement. Some of us are members of any of the over 150 organizations that constantly work for a mutual future between Jews and Arabs in Israel and in the Palestinian territories. We say Jews and Arabs refuse to be enemies. We will not play the role of the national leaders or their negotiating teams. As the organizers, we are not proposing the one-state, two-state federation or confederation solution. Each of our speakers will have 5 minutes to make an opening statement and then have more time to answer questions and address the words of the other speakers. They have chosen their own words, and those do not necessarily represent the views of anyone else or the organizers of this symposium. We all agree to respectfully disagree. We warn you, we might use certain terms or words that sound inflammatory or insulting to others, but I guarantee you that none of us has any such intent. As Brother Rodney Sadler has taught us, we speak with love speech. We apologize in advance if anything one of us says causes either pain or anger. We will present the other side of the Israeli-Palestinian reality that you almost never see or hear about. Mainstream American and international media won't show you any more than the tip of the iceberg. But you can't be expected to take a university course to learn about it all. So here we are. We thank each and every one of you for your participation. There are some very influential and well-known viewer participants among you, and we are honored to have all of you with us. Please don't keep us a secret. Get energized by our speakers. We hope Americans tell your senators and representatives that they should encourage the Biden-Harris administration to prioritize Israeli-Palestinian conflict higher and with urgency. We ask that you keep the YouTube chat quiet until we're done so you can hear our speakers. This isn't a contest, and we need your attention. Now, let's embark on our meaningful process. We hope you find it interesting. And now just a personal statement. I've been a supporter of citizen diplomacy since the Kennedy election in 1960. In 2003, I had the great honor of editing the entire post-publication English version of the Geneva Initiative Final Status Agreement, which you'll hear about in this symposium. Yet 19 years later, here we are holding an agreement that was signed by both Palestinian and Israeli negotiators, waiting for progress that will end our conflict, our suffering and death. I believe that to be really pro-Israeli, one must also be pro-Palestinian, and vice versa. Because if only one side wins, both sides will lose. We all will win. Thank you. Okay, Fatima, will you please introduce our first speaker?
Yes, sorry. Can everyone hear me? Can everyone hear me? Yes, that's it. Okay, sorry. Yes, and thank you, Moshe, for those very moving words. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Nivine Sandouka. Nivine Sandouka, a board member of the Palestinian Peace Coalition, is an expert in the field of program development, management, peace building, and gender issues. She achieved her MA in Democracy and Human Rights from Birzeit University and currently works with the German Association for Development Cooperation. She is the executive director of Our Rights, Hokokana, I'm hoping I pronounced that correctly, a new NGO based in Jerusalem, which focuses on civic and political rights of Palestinians in East Jerusalem, especially women, and runs a grassroots initiative called Judy, From Me to You, which aims to bring women together. She is a civil society member of the International Reference Group for the World Council of Churches. And it's my pleasure to please, Nivine, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear. Hi, everybody. Good evening, good morning. Assalamu alaikum, shalom, sabah al-khair, masa al-khair, all the different languages that I know, basically. Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you for having me here today. So I was asked to start my presentation with a very small sentence of, I believe peace is possible. And when I was asked, why do you believe peace is possible? It took me some time to answer that question. And I think the answer to that was basically because I am a generation that witnessed a peace agreement being signed between the Israelis and the Palestinians. I witnessed that when I was 10 years old, when the Oslo Accord was signed between the Israeli government and the Palestinian representative, Yasser Arafat, in 1993. So just before that, I lived or witnessed a childhood where basically I saw my neighbors being killed. I saw young men throwing stones, soldiers, Israeli soldiers coming into my school as a little child, little kids running around, tear gas. But suddenly, peace was signed between both leaderships. And suddenly, instead of throwing stones, we were actually throwing flowers. And instead of seeing the other as the enemy, we started actually going to the west side of the city. When I say west or east, because I'm from Jerusalem, Palestinian who lives in Jerusalem. So when I say west, it means the western side of the city that is basically inhabited by Jewish Israelis, while the east side is mostly inhabited by Palestinians, Christians and Muslims. So that's why I believe peace is possible. And looking at it right now, it seems that more than ever, we're actually striving to have that peace, especially because there is a younger generation. I am a mother myself, and the younger generation are actually suffering again. And it breaks my heart to see them have to deal again with the same injustice and facing racism that I had to face when I was a child as well. Living in Jerusalem specifically, we, until now, the Palestinians who live in the city, I'm talking about 340,000 Palestinians who do not have a citizenship of any sort. We're residents. Even though we are born in the city, we are still considered as residents. And this actually has many manifestations. One of them, that we cannot choose where we live because we always need to prove that our center of life is in Jerusalem. We do not have a proper representation because from one hand, participating in the Israeli municipality elections is considered as treason, while at the same hand, if you participate to have a voice with the Palestinian Authority, you are risking that you're going to go to jail, Israeli jail. So we're kind of in the middle, and our life is controlled by this status of being a resident. At the same time, I don't want to talk more about the levels of violence that we have been witnessing, especially in the West Bank, by Israeli settlers and by Palestinian youth who are trying to protect their land, because they're basically the pillar for what is happening in the West Bank is to stop settlement expansion, but also to offer protection for civilians. We don't also want to forget Gaza. Gaza itself has been under siege for more than 10 years already. And when I say under siege, it means that they don't have proper electricity. Some people have never left Gaza. And I have been there, and you can see the whole of Gaza basically in less than an hour. So basically that's how small Gaza is. And those people are under siege. So more and more, this makes me angry, and it makes me want to resist, but it also wants me to achieve my rights. It forces me to achieve my rights as a human being, to also have dignity, not only for myself, but also for those people, both the Palestinians and the Israelis, because both are equally victims of this situation. So I'm happy to see here a couple of friends that I know personally who are actually what I would call soldiers for peace, to bring a better future for everybody. To end my my short presentation, basically, I'd just like to share with you a video. And I think it's a video file. Okay, it's on the downloads, and here it is. It's very short. So, does it? So, as you can see, those are kids. And the kids playing, you can never tell who is actually an Israeli and who is a Palestinian. That is actually my nephew. He's the boy. And the girls are Israelis, but you can see them all playing together. And that's basically the future that we want to protect for them. So that's why peace is possible.
Wow. Thank you, Nivine. Excellent. Okay, we're moving on to our second speaker. Mori Sela is a peace activist and the founder of Israelis and Palestinians for Peace, otherwise known as IP4P. We studied at Columbia University in New York, Tel Aviv University, and the New York Institute of Technology. He currently works in high tech. Mori, please open your microphone, and it's yours. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Moshe. And as was asked, and also the way I believe peace is possible and the only way. I want to start by explaining the source of knowledge that I have in this area and why am I even brought up here to talk about. Up until about a year ago, I would call myself a normal Israeli citizen, not very involved in politics, not very involved in activism, taking care of my career, taking care of my family and my hobbies. And we went through a process of 4 different elections in Israel. And I noticed that almost no discussion about the Palestinian issue came up in those elections, as if we are in a normal situation, as if we can concentrate on the Corona issue and on the economy and things like that, and there is no problem. So that was for me like an alert that something must be done. I know there have been many peace organizations before that, and still there are, but I didn't feel them enough, and I wanted to see more of that. And I did join Combatant for Peace, and I joined Standing Together, two excellent organizations that I really appreciate. And in those organizations, what I liked about, the most is the discussion that are facilitated there between Israelis and Palestinians. So in Standing Together, it's Israeli citizens, Arabs and Jews sitting together and meeting and talking and doing some activities together. And Combatant for Peace, it's the same thing between Palestinians from the West Bank and Israelis. And we meet together, we do a project together, and it's great, and it brings people together. But what I felt was that it's somewhat limited because it's physical, it's somewhat limited in scale, and in the flexibility to run it very often. And so I wanted to create something similar online. And therefore, I created Israelis and Palestinians for Peace as a Facebook group. We started last April, just a few people in the beginning, and now we are about 4,000 people. And also a clubhouse club that is now about 2,000 people. And what we proud ourselves with is the fact that this is the Facebook group is the most active peace Facebook group. We have more discussion about peace than any other group in this area. And we have weekly Zoom meetings and weekly clubhouse rooms. And I'm saying all of that not to brag, but really I want to convey a couple of messages. First, the source of my knowledge and the source of what I'm going to say today is through the discussion that I had with hundreds and hundreds of Palestinians, where I hear the other side and also hear the Israelis. And so you could hear the different stories and understand the complexity of the situation much better. And that's one thing. And the other reason I'm saying all of that is I think I would like to give inspiration for other people who are interested in this topic to become active and involved and participate in events. And I didn't even mention a big physical event that I was about, one of the founders of, where we brought 15 different peace organizations together to a kibbutz in the Galilee called Hanaton. And we did a lovely peace event with a lot of good discussion there. So my point is, I want to encourage people to become more active, not just consume information, but actually try to change the status quo. And so to the point itself, I want to start by talking about why peace is so needed. First of all, as Nivine said so wonderfully, the situation for Palestinians is just not something that could be sustained. The way they live, whether it's in Gaza under siege or whether it's in the West Bank under military rule. We have to remember, some people think, oh, there is the Palestinian Authority who control the Palestinians in the West Bank. No, it's not true. It's not true. It's the Israeli military who control them. There are some rights that are given to the Palestinian Authority, but the military can do whatever they want. They can get into any Palestinian house, whether it's area A, B, or C, any time of the year, and they do that. And they can arrest anybody without a proper justice process. And again, there is two types of laws in the West Bank. There is the law for the Palestinians, which is military law, and there is the law for the Jews, the settlers, which is an Israeli law. Two different systems of law. If it reminds you of something from South Africa from the 90s or 80s, it's not by a chance. This is the situation. So terrible situation in the West Bank, terrible situation in Gaza. And this is one reason why we need peace. I also think that it's bad. I spoke about why it's bad for the Palestinians. I also think it's very bad for Israelis. The fact that we send our children to the West Bank to defend or to protect the settlements, and doing so, getting engaged with civilians, women, children, men, elder, and many times it's involved humiliating these people and also hurting them, sometimes not intentionally, but many of them suffer, of course. All that has huge impact on the soldiers, huge impact on their physical, mental health. And you could see a lot of soldiers with serious mental health issues following their service because of that. And also it basically corrupts the entire Israeli population in terms of their values, and make them more aggressive, less sensitive to the other. And so that's the other reason. And the third reason is the opportunity, okay? If we could live in peace, we would have here prosperity, we would have here commerce, we would have more tourism. Life would be so much better. So these are the three reasons why we need it. And why is it possible? It's possible because right now we have a Palestinian Authority leadership who is actually interested in peace and very reasonable peace. Okay, we, the Israelis, been brainwashed by a right-wing leadership over the last more than a decade, saying that there is no partner on the other side. This is not true. I met personally official representative of the PA who claimed very clearly that they are interested in peace, very logical, very reasonable type of demands, 67 borders, a just solution for refugees, not full right of return, and things like that. So very, very reasonable. And thirdly, I want to say this is the only way, and peace is possible. I think I took more time than I should have. I apologize for that. Moshe, it's your time.
Thank you, Mori. That was, again, very moving words. And thank you so much for initiating such meaningful engagement and dialogue between Israelis and Palestinians. And now it's my pleasure, excuse me, to introduce our next speaker. Tehila Wenger is the Deputy Director at the Geneva Initiative in Israel, the organization that puts Israeli and Palestinian negotiators together to negotiate as if they represented their governments. And they came out of that with a final status peace agreement in 2003. The floor is yours, Tehila. Sorry.
Thank you, Fatima, for the introduction, and to the Israeli-Palestinian Peace Symposium for hosting this event and this opportunity to reach out to the American community on a very important topic. My name is Tehila Wenger. I'm the Deputy Director at the Geneva Initiative. The byline for the event is peace is possible and the only way. And I certainly believe that peace is possible. If I didn't, my work would be unbearably frustrating at best and despicably hypocritical at worst. But to speak about the second part of that statement, that peace is the only way, I actually don't believe that. There are many alternatives to peace. The current reality that we are living in is one of violence, of protracted inequality, one of dehumanization, hatred, and incredible levels of distrust on both sides for the other side. And that's essentially the status quo that we're living with, and that to some extent we've convinced ourselves is normal. And Nivine and Mori both spoke to the price tag that exacts, both from Palestinians and from Israelis. And if we continue to ignore the cost on our lives, our economy, regional stability, and ultimately, I believe, the morality of both sides, the situation is only going to grow worse. The Geneva Initiative is two different organizations. We are a Palestinian organization based in Ramallah and an Israeli organization where I work based in Tel Aviv. And we reach out to leaders and influencers throughout Israeli and Palestinian society to strengthen support for a two-state solution, which the plurality of both Israelis and Palestinians, according to opinion polls, still consider to be the most viable solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I say still, both because the amount of support is decreasing slowly but steadily over time. And I also say still because it's incredible that there is still a plurality on both sides in terms of that support for a two-state solution, in light of the fact that there hasn't been noticeable progress, any progress in an official peace process in many years. So what we do in order to maintain that support and strengthen it is work with politicians, journalists, business leaders, municipal leaders, and more, in order to give them the opportunity, and it's an increasingly rare opportunity, to meet with the other side and speak with them about everything from security arrangements and water negotiations to narrative. How does a Palestinian in Nablus perceive the events of 1948 versus an Israeli from Beersheba? And the goal of these meetings and of our work and policy recommendations, as well as our work with the diplomatic community in order to maintain support there as well for a two-state solution, is to bridge the differences between the sides and not to erase those differences, which even if that were possible, we don't even consider it to be desirable. But rather to overcome the differences between us in order to move forward together towards a better future for both sides. So we give tools, knowledge, connections to key players among Israeli and Palestinian leadership and influencers, and then have them go back to their constituencies or circles of influence and spread a positive discourse about peace and a political solution to the conflict in order to prepare the ground for negotiations and ultimately for a viable peace process.
Okay. Thank you, Tehila. You finished, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure a lot of people had no idea of what the Geneva Initiative is or is doing. It was very important to hear from you. Okay, I'm going to be showing some slides that will hopefully help assess our prospects for succeeding in our goal of having Biden encourage Israeli and Palestinian negotiators to restart talks. I'll present some poll data that make the situation in Israel, in the West Bank and Gaza, and in the US easier to understand. Obviously, the end goal for most of us is for an end to our conflict. But this can help us see what the situation is in each locale when the polls were taken. Please excuse me for going through the data very quickly. Many pages were written as the background for each poll, and we could easily speak for hours on each of them. So remember that the slides presented are some selected from each poll. They're not the entire poll. That the presentation reflects data only taken once for each poll and is not ongoing, and therefore the data do not reflect changes in each locale that fluctuate for many reasons. The opinions and comments I will express are not necessarily those of the organizers of this symposium, its speakers, or any other organization. So let's have the slides, please, and we'll begin. I'll start with Adar. Can you bring up the slideshow? One second, we'll have it up here. Please excuse us for here and there certain difficulties where they used to call this a simulcast, happening in 2 places, but this is happening in 3 or 4 places. So it takes some tweaking here and there. Adar, will we have that the slides coming up?
Yeah. Oh, did you not hear me the first time? Maybe I was muted.
Sorry.
I need you to share it again on your end, and then I can bring it up. So you got to click the share screen.
Share screen. Share screen.
Yep, just how we did it in the demo.
Okay, sorry. 1 second. It'll take me another second here. Share. I see it. I'm ready. Can you bring that in?
Yeah, there we go.
Here we go. Okay. So I'll be starting with the Israeli public and then the Palestinians in the West Bank and the Gaza, and then an exit poll of voters in the November 2020 election, presidential election, who identified themselves as Jewish. Okay. If President Biden gives a green light to Bennett or encourages him to sit with Abu Mazen, might it go against the majority of what Israelis want? Well, what we see here is that 51% support holding such a meeting. What you don't see here is that even 40% of right-wing voters, 82% of Yesh Atid centrist voters, and 93% of center-right blue and white voters support such a meeting. Remember that the poll is of the Israeli public and not only of government supporters. Are you worried that if the Bennett government makes progress with Palestinians, it won't be supported by Israelis? Well, 43% would increase their support of the current government, and 38% would decrease their support. So the government shouldn't fear making progress, although the right-wingers within the government might fight it. And what about Gaza? How should an Israeli government, any Israeli government, deal with the crisis in Gaza and the threat of another horrific war that would kill many and even reignite the intercommunal violence within Israel, as we saw last May? The survey also showed that about half of Israelis support the Israeli government conducting an open and direct dialogue with Hamas, while 40% oppose this. Looking into the future, excuse me, if Abu Mazen relinquishes power or is unable to continue, or if there is an uprising against the Palestinian Authority removing it from power, half of Israelis think that his replacement will have a more negative attitude toward Israel. We will soon see what Palestinians think about his successor in the slides about the Palestinian poll also. So here we have a poll of Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. And this was conducted by Dr. Khalil Shkaki in September of 2021. So the general findings of his very extensive poll on the peace process show continued but slow decline in support for the two-state solution. They also show high levels of support for armed struggle as the best means of ending the occupation, with almost half of the public endorsing this position. Consistent with that, we have a slim majority opposing a resumption of Palestinian-Israeli negotiations under the sponsorship of the Quartet. For those who don't know, the Quartet comprises the United Nations, the United States, the European Union, and Russia. Excuse me again. Despite this, a majority of Palestinians view positively the confidence-building measures that would improve living conditions in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Now, if new presidential elections were held today, and only two were nominated, Mahmoud Abbas and Ismail Haniyeh, this is what would happen. 51%, only 51% would participate from among all of the possible voters. Abbas would receive 34%, and Haniyeh from the Hamas would get 56% of the votes. For Abu Mazen's successor, for whatever reason, 33% say that they want Marwan Barghouti to be the next head of the Palestinians. 22% say Ismail Haniyeh, 6% say Mohammed Dahlan, and another 6% say Yahya Sinwar. In looking about what Palestinians feel about the success possibilities of reconciliation, we see that only 32% are optimistic about that and 63% are pessimistic. And if we look back to June of the last year, optimism stood at 41%, today 32%. So time is not in favor of an agreement. We have to remember that as we keep moving forward. Here you see the expectations that Palestinians have of the PA government making progress toward internal reconciliation and reunification between Gaza and the West Bank, between the various factions. And we see that there's very little expectations of success and mostly expectations of failure. And now we're going to talk about the J Street National Jewish Voters Survey, which was conducted by GBOA during the elections in 2020. 70% of Jewish voters supported playing an active role, even if it meant going public with disagreements with Israel. This is of Jewish voters. This is not the image that the general public perceives in the US and elsewhere, especially in Israel. It is not what the Jewish establishment or AIPAC would want really to have publicized. 80% supported the US playing an active role if it meant going public with its disagreements with both the Palestinians and the Israelis. 20% opposed playing an active role in that case. "67% of American Jews polled supported pressuring Israel to make compromises to achieve peace." This is a very interesting observation that I don't think most people would have recognized before this. 71% of them want the US to act as a fair and even-handed broker between the Israelis and the Palestinians. This percentage, by the way, coincides with the percentage of Jews who did not vote for Trump. And I think we know the reason. The text on the left is in the spirit of the Geneva Initiative Final Status Agreement. 75% overall of the Jews who voted, those who identify themselves as Jews in the exit polls, 75% overall support such an agreement. Watch this in the recorded, you can go back and watch this in the recorded symposium that you're watching now, or if you're watching it in the recorded version, and you can delve deeper into these slides, and we would appreciate hearing your comments about what has been presented here. Okay, in summary, the poll reflects a reality among American Jewish voters that contradicts the generally accepted one, which should give license to those percentages of them to become citizen diplomats, to insist of their religious and communal leaders to support our goal and convince their representatives in the House and the Senate to push the administration to encourage Israeli and Palestinian leaders to get their negotiators back at the table before any of the three windows of opportunity close. And I mention here three windows that will very likely will be closing. The first is a Republican majority either in the House or the Senate or both. Second window closing on us is a new and less willing partner in the Palestinian territories. We don't know when it will close. Hopefully it won't, but it is looking likely right now. And the third window is an end to the current Israeli government, which we also hope doesn't really happen, but which for the first time in 21 years includes parties on the left, not just the right. So I want to thank you for all listening to all of this, and I hope it is given you some information that you'll be able to deal with and understand better our total situation. And with that, I'm going to introduce Dubi Avigurd, also who gave us the invocation, and it's his opportunity to give some of his opinions about how peace is possible and it's the only way. Dubi, go ahead. Thank you. Please unmute. Adar, there we go. Go ahead. You're good.
All right. First of all, peace will be, because this is a normal life. Normal life is living in peace. Look around you. Look to your right, you look to your left, up and down. This is the normal way. As human beings, we also emphasize and look at crucial things, but peace is a normal. That's first of all. And I want to take you to some of my thoughts on what's going on. Before 1948, before we came to this place and Zionism, whatever it is, people, Jewish people in the world lived in all over the world. But there were non-normal people on their culture life because they lived on the past. They went to synagogue, they prayed, they thought on the cultural life was only at the past. As I say, synagogue and they read the Bible and stories Bible, and their present was on their life place. Who were in Europe, in Iraq, in Egypt, in wherever it is, they live their present on somebody else present, because their present was something from them culture. So the culture, the culture of the Judaism was past and future only. The present was belonged to the local people where they lived. So afterwards, their future was only Messiah. They thought about the future as something will happen, somebody will take them back to their land, so on and so forth. So it was an abnormal nation. Without present, we had a strong past and a strong future, which nobody can do anything around about it, because it was only the Messiah. Coming here to the state of Israel, 20 years, until 67, we had a normal life. We took upon ourselves to build our present, our future, and the past was past. But we tried to make our nation normal until 67. On the 67 war, something happened, something big happened. First of all, it was too fast, this war, and people started believing on Messiah. Something bigger than us happened, and many parties, especially in the religious parties, people who are part of the political system, thought about the Messiah. And in Israel, as you know, the religion is part of the politics, which make us many problems. One of them is the Messiah system. So what happened is that the people in Israel started thinking on Messiah things and started to be racist. This is the society in Israel. Today we live with a major number of people that became racist and full of fears with the Shoah complex, with Messiah dreams on the land without Arabs, but only Israeli that we live here for good, and so on and so forth. This is the situation in Israel now. I'm here because I think peace is possible. Although the things, and Moshe and me are partners in many politics things. We demonstrate together. We try to make all kind of things that will bring peace. And looking from, I'm 70 now, 50 years ago, and today the situation is not so lovely as we say. But peace is possible because life is like the swing. One time you up, one time you down, one time you up there, other time you up there. And that's why peace will come. And it will not come because automatically it will come. It will come because people like us, which we are not so few as we see us. Many, many people are with us. We represent plenty of them. But we should keep going. We should keep doing. That's why I'm going to the West Bank. I'm going to pick olives with a farmer there. I'm going to the shepherd to help them with their problems, because I believe and I'm optimistic, but I can't stop doing it. We need to keep on going, and we will win. Thank you.
Thank you, Dubi. Excellent.
Thank you, Rabbi Dubi. That, such inspiring words, and thank you for your leadership and for your engagement with Palestinians in your community. It speaks volumes when people lead by example as you have. So thank you for that. With that, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Libby Lenkinski. And give me a moment, just about there. Okay, here we are. Libby Lenkinski is the Vice President for Public Engagement at the New Israel Fund, where she leads all aspects of NIF's public efforts in the United States. Prior to joining NIF, Libby lived and worked in the Israeli nonprofit field for almost a decade for human rights organizations, for documentary films, and new media initiatives. Libby is particularly passionate about the role arts and culture plays in social and political change. Wow, that brought a smile to my face. As a visual artist, I love that. Sorry, my own personal commentary. About the role arts and culture plays in social and political change, because how can we move others if we are not moved ourselves? How can we bring about a better future if we can't imagine one? Those are wonderful questions, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Libby, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And thanks to my colleagues on this panel for your inspiring and remarkable words getting us to this point. And to you, Rabbi Dubi, I say amen to the prayer that you gave us in your words and also with your feet and your actions. And I join you. So thank you. I believe peace is possible because I believe it's inevitable. I believe that we understand that both peoples have historic claims. And more important than that, we understand that both people live there now and aren't going anywhere. And because of this, I think peace is inevitable. And so it has to be possible. I also believe that peace is possible because the Israelis, the Palestinians, and the international activists that I have had the privilege and honor to work with for the last 20 years are stubborn as hell and aren't giving up the cause of peace, justice, equality, and democracy in the region. So I don't believe that anyone's giving up until we achieve it. And so I believe it's possible for that reason. At New Israel Fund, where I've worked for the last almost decade, our approach to the question of peace is a little more broadly defined. So we're working for an Israel that's at peace with its neighbors and also at peace with itself. And so what does that actually mean? It means that our work and the work to end the Israeli occupation of Palestinian people and land in the occupied territories and bring about a negotiated peaceful resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is inherently and completely connected to the work towards a more just and democratic Israel. It means that issues like religion and state, closing social and economic gaps, combating racism, and working towards equality and shared society are intermeshed. Because if we were to achieve peace through a negotiated solution, but with only the weakest of democratic foundations or foundations to democracy, that peace would have very little chance of sustaining. And it's very hard to imagine truly building strong democratic foundations in Israel while we're occupying another people. So those things are inherently connected. And in this way, all of the work that New Israel Fund does, and for those who don't know, just the basics, New Israel Fund is a 42-year-old partnership organization between mostly American Jews and Israelis on the ground. We raise about $30 million a year to support several hundred Israeli registered nonprofits working across many issues, including organizations represented here on this call, like Rabbis for Human Rights and others. And for us, all the work that we're doing, whether it's Women of the Wall attempting to have more equitable prayer space at the Kotel, to organizations working on the Mizrahi left, to the Negev Coexistence Forum, and all the way through to B'Tselem, Breaking the Silence, all of it in some way is about Israel at peace with its neighbors or at peace with itself. When we're thinking specifically about the conflict and relationship with Palestinians in the occupied territories, most of our work in that, and this is also the field that I personally came out of, so most of my work in Israel was in the human rights sector, we're very committed to supporting groups that are working on human rights in the occupied territories, and specifically keeping the issue of the occupation and the reality that Palestinians face in the occupied territories on the public agenda in Israel. Because when Israel built the separation barrier, it also brought in hundreds of policies of separation that have been very, very effective. You can live a life in Tel Aviv. I lived this life in Tel Aviv. My sister is currently living it. You can go weeks without ever thinking about what's going on just an hour away. In fact, when I started going to protests in villages in the West Bank, my Israeli friends would say, "Wait, where did you just go? Oh, she must have used her American passport to get in." As if you can't just go there, and you can. So these policies of separation and the wall and the separation barrier have also created a separation of perspective. And what's happening over there can quite easily today stay over there. And so for us, it's really important to continue to support human rights organizations that are insisting on telling those stories, on documenting what's going on, and on sharing it in the Israeli press, social media, etc., as well as advocating for access and accessing all possible recourses that Palestinians have, dwindling recourses that they have to look for justice when they have experienced crimes or violence. We're also working to build a broad, progressive movement in Israel that cares about all kinds of issues that are impacting the everyday lives of people in Israel and the occupied territories. These are groups like Standing Together, Zazim, Mechazkim. These are all Israeli nonprofits that are not committed to any one particular issue. They're building a worldview that Israelis can get on board with and fight for, that also brings more Israelis into contact with anti-occupation and peace activism. So standing together, a jointly led group of grassroots Palestinian citizens and Jewish citizens of Israel have started to go weekly to protests in Sheikh Jarrah in East Jerusalem, have organized people to join with groups like Rabbis for Human Rights and Tayush and other activist groups that work in the occupied territories. And sometimes that broad progressive framework can be a really good entry for more Israelis to reckon with and become mobilized around also peace and the occupation. Finally, I want to be brief, so I'm going to skip over. My colleagues did a very good job of talking about some of the work that's being done in the peace movement itself. I think I'll leave you with a couple of things that I've been thinking about more recently that haven't been covered already, because I think that we all want to move in the direction of like solutions and what's practical and achievable. And I feel that way too. And our work, particularly on the policy advocacy, is always looking at that. But I just want to also encourage us, peace seekers and justice seekers, to allow ourselves those moments of imagination and inspiration of what might be possible, even if it doesn't look practical at this moment. And for me, very often, those moments of inspiration come out of art, as you heard in my bio. So, I see a hip hop band like System Ali, who have Palestinian rappers together with Jewish rappers in Russian, Amharic, Hebrew, Arabic, English. It's a huge balagan, a huge mess on stage, but sometimes just seeing something like that sparks the possibility of actually what might be possible, even if we don't have the strategic plan of how to get there. And because my colleagues focus so much on the practical and on the solutions, which I also support, I just wanted to leave us with the idea that those moments of impossible imagination are pretty valuable too for our movement and for our purpose of finding peace. So thank you so much. It's an honor to be with all of you.
Thank you. Excellent. Fine words. Okay. First of all, thank you all for your comments, your opening statements. We're going to ask a couple of questions to begin with, and each of you will have a chance to answer the question. And during that time, you're also allowed to comment on the words of any of the other speakers. So feel free to go ahead with that. Just try to keep your answers fairly limited. We're already an hour and 15 minutes, and we only have like 15 minutes left. So I apologize, but the first question is, what is the greatest obstruction to peace created by your own people? And let's say, Tehila, would you like to start with that? Or would anyone else like to jump in? Either way.
I'm happy to. I love criticizing my own side, the other side, anybody's side. So in talking about the greatest obstruction to peace, I'm going to focus on the present. I think that it's easy to look back in the past and cast blame. And when we do that, we get completely bogged down in terms of whose fault is it? Was it really the Palestinians or the Israelis? At what point in the negotiation process? Let's talk about the peoples. No, let's talk about the leaders. And that's an endless conversation. And it is an important one. But at the end of the day, both sides have made massive mistakes. And if we can't move on from there and focus on what is happening today and where we go from here, then we will become very stuck. So currently we have an Israeli government that has publicly and officially declared that they will not engage in peace negotiations with the Palestinian Authority. And that's unprecedented in recent years. You've had Israeli governments that have been very reluctant to engage in negotiations, that have been obstructionist in all kinds of ways. But you haven't had a government come out and say point blank, I will not meet with the other side, and I will not discuss an official peace process with them. And I want to take a few minutes to really reflect on what that means as an Israeli. To be the side that is currently saying, I won't even consider the possibility that I can sit with leadership on the other side and discuss a nonviolent solution to this conflict. The Israeli side, part of the Israeli narrative, the mainstream narrative, is this sisma, this motto of there is no partner for peace on the other side. And it's something that sort of entered the discourse around the time of the failure of the Camp David talks and has persisted in various guises ever since, that the Palestinians do not present a partner for peace, not really. And today, when you look at the Israeli government, they are coming out and saying, proudly, or sometimes in dismay, depending on which particular character you're looking at, we are not a partner. We will not be a partner. And I think that we need to think about what that means as Israelis, what that means about where we're at historically, and what that means for our future, and how we can break out of that, because we have become what we accuse the other side of being.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Who would like to go next? Mori, would you please go ahead?
Happy to. So I totally agree with Tehila. I want to highlight another aspect of it and why this is possible. The fact that we have a government that really refuses to talk with the other side. The reason is that we've been through a decade now of brainwash by the right-wing leadership that we had. And that brainwashed basically, as Tehila said, created a discourse where people believe there is no partner on the other side. They also believe that peace is risky, that peace would not work. So people take the example of what happened in Gaza. So this is a common theme that I'm hearing all the time from Israeli. Oh, okay, we will give up all our settlements. We will give them the West Bank. And look what happened in Gaza. We will get the same thing here. Okay, so we pulled out of Gaza in 2005. And now there is Hamas over there. And we get rockets every now and then. Because, again, and now I'm saying what Israelis are saying, not myself, of course. They're saying Palestinians, they don't want just the 67 land. They want the 48 land. They want everything. And so they will continue to fight it. And even if we give up the land, they will continue to fight. And my answer to that is really, yes, they do want everything. Many Israelis want everything. But I think we fail to see the change that happened in the Arab world in general. The Arab world in general accepted a two-state solution back in 2002 with the Saudi initiative, and then the entire Arab League basically approved that, including the Palestinian Authority, which basically said 67 borders. This is, what we agree to. We do want everything, but we agree to that, and we agree to live in peace with Israel because we want to live in peace. And so it's not just me talking about security. We have an organization called Commanders for Israeli Security. Okay, this is a group of 309 generals from the Israeli Defense Force and Israeli other, security forces. And they all basically came to the conclusion that peace is more secure than the current situation. The current situation seems to be secure for Israelis, but it's actually a burst that is about to kind of burst in our head. A bubble that is about to burst in our face, and it's just not sustainable. So I would like to end with that. I think we have to keep it short. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to jump in and just add to what Tehila and Mori just said. And I want to say two things about what I think Israelis, what our side, what my side of this, though I don't exactly line up the sides in that way anymore, but I see the us and them as a little bit different than Israelis and Palestinians these days. But I think that what Israel and Israelis can do, and the main thing, in my view, two things around what we're doing right now that gets us farther away from peace and what we can do to get closer. I think it's not just the unwillingness on the official level to sit down. I agree with that. I also think it's the continued expansion of settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, as well as the home demolitions and evacuations of Palestinian families from Jordan Valley communities and East Jerusalem communities right now these days. And we must raise our voices against those things happening in order to keep the possibility for peace and an end to the conflict real and viable. And so that is one thing that is an action that Israel is currently taking that makes us march away from the possibility for peace, and we need to bend that back. That is one thing. And then the second thing, which is not typically thought of as part of this conversation, but for me is essential, is to acknowledge the historic catastrophe of the Nakba of 1948 for Palestinians. The reason is that, and I think this was very clear in May, in the crisis of last May, when more Palestinian voices were featured as commentary and as storytellers about what was happening in the American media than I have seen for the 20 years that I've been working on this issue. So the influx of new Palestinian perspectives that were non-monolithic, that included Palestinians from Lod and other towns in what we think of as 1948 Israel, as well as Palestinians from East Jerusalem, the West Bank, Gaza, and the diaspora. I understood those voices, many of those voices, to be saying, we're one people. And so what happens in Gaza is what happens in Sheikh Jarrah, is what happens in Haifa, is what happens in Detroit. And that, to me, was reflective of the need on the Israeli side to address things beyond just 1967 as a path forward, because it will stop there otherwise and be unsustainable without that, and it's a moral imperative. So I wanted to say that those two pieces about settlement expansion and home evacuations, as well as acknowledging the 1948 reality and experience for Palestinians as well.
Thank you, Libby. I want to take the opportunity before we go ahead and just mention to people that it might be obvious by looking at the faces and the names here in on your screen, but we were supposed to have one more Palestinian representative, former member of Knesset, Taleb Asana, was supposed to join us, and I haven't been able to connect with him today. And we're very sorry that he couldn't. We'll try to get him into one of our future symposia. So would anyone else like to continue and answer that question, or should we move on?
I think as the only Palestinian, I can answer that as well. So, because we've heard many Israeli voices. So I think that's a good question that you asked about looking internally and putting a mirror instead of, as a Palestinian, blaming everything on occupation. And I think as a Palestinian, we actually had an opportunity to build a state, a democratic state. And the fact that we only had elections once, and then we didn't have any more elections, that was back in 2006, but not again. We were supposed to have one in 2005, but they were canceled because of political reasons. That means that as Palestinians, we are stuck in the same mentality and we are hijacked in the same narratives. We don't have and we don't see new politicians or new and young leadership taking the lead and, looking at the occupation and the conflict with fresh eyes. So this is something that I think we would actually need to look internally at ourselves, the democracy within the Palestinian territories. Also, the conflict between Fatah and Hamas, the fact that we actually need an internal reconciliation between the Gaza and the West Bank representatives, because that is a cornerstone for talking and with peace with the Israelis as well. The Israelis cannot only have peace with Hamas and cannot only have peace with the West Bank PA. They need to come together in one government. And finally, what really hinders peace is the fact that this notion of normalization, people who are actually peace activists and who are trying to build bridges between Israelis and Palestinians, are considered by the wider Palestinian public as normalizers and traitors. And why is that? It's because basically the Palestinians have seen in Israel over a couple of years elections every time there is a right-wing government being elected. So the Palestinians are saying, so there's no partner on the other side, which means that any Palestinian who works with the other side is a traitor and is a normalizer. So that is another challenge within the Palestinian society itself, is how do we actually counter that, that narrative as well.
Great. Nivine, thank you so much. And thank you to the entire panel for such incredibly self-reflective responses, for the historical perspectives. This has been enormously instructive and informative. So with that, we are just about out of time. I'm going to ask everyone on the panel to just give a 1-minute closing statement, and really just 1 minute, please, because that's all the time we have. So I'd like to ask Libby to go first. Go ahead, please, Libby. Give your, like to hear your closing statement.
Thank you so much. I think I'll just pick up on something that Rabbi Dubi said earlier, and I want to remind all of us that there are lots of us on all the sides that we currently think of all the oceans and all the national identifications, that are looking for peace, that want peace, and that are working with their blood, sweat, and tears to achieve it. And as I said before, we're stubborn as hell. So I think the thing to do is to join in whatever way feels like the right entry. And from there, you see where it goes. I don't think any of us on this call imagined that we would be exactly here doing this at this moment when it all started, whenever that was for us. I certainly didn't. And I was reminded of that when I spoke to my Israel history teacher from high school this morning on a different call, and we were reminiscing. I had no idea that things would land where they landed, and neither do you. But there are a great many of us. It's not margins, it's not fringe, it's actually the mainstream. That's the part that they don't want us to say or understand about ourselves, but this is the mainstream. So that's what I will leave myself and the rest of us with for today. Thank you so much. Really, it's been an honor.
Okay. Nivine, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. So thank you a lot for today's panel. I think it's been extremely inspiring to listen to everybody. And I would like to add maybe a couple of points that let us think of the protection of civilians from all sides as a pillar of peace. And what is our role actually to bring about that protection of civilians? The other thing is, I was reading the comments as well. I think I would recommend to read more and to get more involved into reading news outlets, not only Western, but also maybe from Palestine that exist in English, from Israel that exist in English as well, so that when people become more informed, that's when they become more engaged and more, I believe, proactive. The other thing is that some people might argue, but there is some economic ties between the West Bank and Israel and maybe even in Gaza. And I would say that economic peace is not a sustainable solution. We actually need to push for negotiations. And if anybody is hearing this from the American government cannot keep the status quo as it is, because the situation is boiling. And they need to force a longer term peace process negotiations between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And by that, I'll end, and thanks for listening.
Great. Rabbi Dubi, would you like to go next, please? Thank you, Nivine. Go ahead, Rabbi Dubi. You have to unmute.
Not anymore.
Great.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the chance to be with you. That first of all, we should keep our optimism for the next generation, because I'm maybe the older here, because that's what should be. There is no other chance, and I think we should make more meetings, people to people. We should skip the politicians. They are not, I think they're still relevant, but we should put them on the non-relevant side, so people to people will bring the peace for sure. Thank you very much, and keep going.
Okay, with that, Tehila, would you like to go next, please?
Sure. So thank you for organizing the event. And I would just end with the thought that the biggest threat to the peace camp is not necessarily extremism or even hate. It's despair and defeatism that I think we see increasingly in both societies and even in the international community. The assumption that we can't actually reach peace. And I think that there's a power to that, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if you're listening to this event, if you've tuned in, that means that you have enough hope to still be engaged. And I personally derive hope from that. So thank you. And I hope you continue to be active and to care about this issue.
Thank you, Tehila. And with that, I think Mori is our last speaker. So please.
Wow, what an honor. Thank you so much. I want to say the following. A lot of people consider this a conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. I consider it a different type of conflict. I think it's a conflict between hope and fear. It's a conflict between light and dark. It's a conflict between those who can see the other or those who can only see themselves. So if you are one of the first ones, if you are for light, if you are for hope, and if you are able to see the other, please consider yourself on the winning side and make sure we are winning. Take part, go to any of those wonderful organizations that are here. And I would use this time to do some shameless promotion to my organization as well. So it's called the Israelis and Palestinians for Peace. And you can find it if you search it on Facebook. Just take part in, join the movement. We are in the movement and we need to make change. Thank you so much.
Mori, I put the link to your organization in the chat for people to see on YouTube if they want.
That's awesome. Thank you, Mori, for your continued work and work with your Palestinian counterpart, Dr. Warda Sada, in leading this incredibly important organization. Yeah. So with that, we are past time. It's that time, and we are about to end. It's past time, and I wanted to thank everyone. I wanted to thank the audience, and of course, it goes without saying, I wanted to thank our incredible lineup of speakers today who have given us such amazing perspectives, historically, personally, emotionally, on every level, about what's happening right now and what and how they think things need to change. So we are grateful for your participation. Once again, as we say at every symposium that we have had so far, this is not the last you will see of us. There will be lots more coming up. So stay tuned. This is a series, as you might have guessed from the name, the symposium series. And we will have a few more coming up in the next few weeks. We will also be having a women's perspective only among them. So look out for that as well. So I will end my comments there and turn it over to my co-moderator, Moshe.
Thank you. Wow. Very inspirational evening. I thank you all. I thank our viewer participators. Let me remind everyone who was either watching us or knows about this or wants to pass it on to others, that you can also watch the recorded symposium at the same link that you use to see us here. You can afterwards, it might take a few minutes to get it back, the recording up, but the same link should bring you to be able to rewatch or watch for the first time the entire symposium. So pass the word around, because I think it was both inspiring. It offered some new ideas. It offered facts that many people don't know. And for those of you in the United States, please become a civil activist, a civic activist. Do your part in trying to help us by notifying your representatives in the House or in the Senate. Let them know that we're going to be coming to them, and we're going to be putting in resolutions to be passed for supporting an more active role of the United States government, of the Biden administration, in pushing the idea of getting our leaders to start sitting together. Abu Mazen has said, all we have to do is just sit. We don't have to agree on anything, but we do have to start and sit, which means we have some hope. Let's not lose that hope. I thank you all. I'm going to also thank especially Adar Weinreb for his gracious jumping in and volunteering to pipe this out to all of you. I will let Adar finish the broadcast again. Ila laka. See you all. Bye-bye. Litro.
Thank you all. This was wonderful, and I'm very much looking forward to hosting you all again. I think this is a partnership that, will be fruitful for many years to come. So I'm looking forward to that. For those who don't know yet, next Wednesday, 7 p.m. Jerusalem time, we're going to have Yishai Fleischer debating Amrzar. That's going to be a fiery one. Yep, exactly. So tune in for that, and wait to hear from us when the next symposium will be. Very much looking forward to it.